Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. For today's video, we're obviously going to be talking about all the books that I read for the month of August. Before we get into the video though, if you haven't already, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. That way you never miss another one of my videos. Okay, so for the month of August, I literally read 12 books. 12 really good books. I don't think I had anything under 4 stars this month, and I'm so happy about that. With that being said, I read a total of 5,019 pages. I think that's the most I've ever read in a month, which again, pat on my back, because all these books that I'm about to talk to you guys about have been so good, so atmospheric, so mysterious, gothic-y, with romance in it. I am just absolutely obsessed with my August wrap-up. I gotta move the books, guys, because again, you can see them. You probably saw the first book that I read this month. Okay, so the first book I read was Butcher and Blackbird by Brianne Weaver. This was a 5-star. This was so good. This is a dark rom-com about serial killers who end up falling in love. And what I love about this book so much is that not only is it very atmospheric, but also the fact that these two broken souls somehow find each other, and despite their flaws and their backgrounds, how broken they are inside because of the things that they've dealt with in their lives, they still somehow happen to find each other and love happens. And I enjoyed it so much. On page 4, I read this book in my 24-hour readathon that I'm gonna link below. I read this book, and on page 4 already, I was having the time of my life. Already I knew this book was gonna be a 5-star. It's just so good. It's got great banter. It's got great steamy scenes. The narrators in this book are just absolutely divine. The fact that it's like dual narration, meaning every time the female main character is speaking in the book, the girl narrator is narrating that part, vice versa with the male narrations. It was just so good, so fun, so quickly paced, and gory. Trigger warnings within themselves were just funny. There's one in there that me and my husband had no idea what it was, and we had to look it up. But overall, I highly recommend this. I don't know why I slept on this. This was so good. The best way to start my month was by reading this book. Then I finally finished Crimson Moth by Kristen Sorelli. Now this one I started reading a couple months back, and for some reason the buildup was very slow. The pacing was super slow in the beginning. I could not get invested in the storyline or the characters. That's why I soft DNF'd it, and I just let it simmer there for a few months until I was ready to pick it back up, and I did in August, and I had such a great time. It was good. You just have to push through the first, I don't know how many pages before it starts to pick up and things start happening and the story starts to unravel. But other than that, I'm glad that I soft DNF'd it, because had I not DNF'd it and pushed through, I probably would have given it a lower rating. I ended up giving this a 4.5, not necessarily a 5, just because of the build-up. The second half of the book really picked up, the romance picked up, and it was good. It was a good time. It was all about vibes here. This book is all about vibes. Don't go in it thinking that right on the first page you're going to be glued. You have to give this book a chance for it to grip you in order for you to be invested in the storyline and the characters. But I had fun. I had a good time. Enough that I do want to pick up the second book because of the way that this ended. I immediately want to read the second book. If you didn't know what this is about, it's about a witch and a witch hunter, and they're enemies to lovers, and that's basically all I'm going to say. I don't want to talk up too much in detail about what the synopsis are of these books. I just want you to go in them blind, just because your expectations won't be as high and you'll have the best time of your life when you read that way. Opposed to sometimes I found myself that when I read a synopsis, a lot of times it gives away a lot of the things that happen in the book, and that's just so annoying to go into a book already knowing and expecting certain things. Just know that this is a really good YA enemies to lovers witchy book with the vibes and the magic about a witch and a witch hunter, and that's all you need to know going into it. Also, be patient with it because it is very slow in the beginning, but you'll have a good time if you just push through a little bit and continue it, because it will leave you wanting to read the second book. I'm still in my vampire era, by the way, you guys. There are some books in here that you will see with that theme. Can't wait to talk to you guys about them. But the next book that I read was King of Battle and Blood by Adrienne Sold, I think is the name of the author. Now this is a steamy vampire human romance. And that's really pretty much all I'm going to say. I ended up giving this one a 4. Everybody and their moms talks about this book like it's the greatest thing that they've ever read when it comes to the vampire background, when it comes to the vampire-ish background in books. I thought it was okay. There was a lot of steams. If you want to read just plain steamy scenes about a vampire and a human, this is the book for you. However, even though I gave it a high rating, I don't know if I want to continue with the rest of the series. This is just a duology, but I don't know if I want to continue with book 2 just because it didn't grip me enough to want to continue. I read it for the vibes, I read it for the fun, I read it for the steam, I read it because there's vampires in it, and that's pretty much it. So this book follows Isolde and Adrian. Isolde is a princess and she is human, and Adrian, of course, is the vampire in this story. In this story, to end years-long war between the vampires and the humans, her father thought it would be convenient to kind of fulfill Adrian's request and marry his daughter off to this vampire. It's their romance. The connection and the attraction that these characters have with each other, you can feel it. Every word that they confess to each other, you can feel it coming out and burning out of the pages. The steamy scenes were great. Adrian, the vampire himself, is very seductive in his words and his manners and the way he acts, his personality. We love that. We love that vibe in this book. But that's pretty much it. There's a little plot in there, you know, in the book. But again, it's mostly steamy scenes. So if you're into that and you just want to read something like this to have a good time, and it's got smut and steam and the vampire vibes, then read it. I recommend it. I had a good time, but again, not enough to want to continue the second book yet. If that makes sense. Then I read Little Secrets by Jennifer Hillier. This book I gave a 5-star. The first Jennifer Hillier book that I read was The Butcher, and I just did not like the concept of the book, the idea, the plot, what the book was about. I just hated it. I cringed because it gave me the ick, if that makes any sense. But this book, I had a great time, and it was suspenseful. It kept me at the edge of my seat, and it's a psychological thriller about a mother who is out shopping on Christmas Day one morning with her 4-year-old son. I think her 4-year-old son. I think he's 4. She answers a telephone call that she receives, looks away for a second, and her son disappears. The story is about her trying to find her son and trying to understand what actually happened to her son in that horrible day of Christmas shopping. And so you see her, and she's on top of the world before this happens, and she's very wealthy. She has a great husband. She has a good relationship. She has the cutest little boy. She has a great family. She also owns like 3 salons where she caters to celebrities. She's a very wealthy businesswoman. And then you see her life crumble right before her eyes the day that she loses her son. In this book, you can't help but to empathize with her because as a mom, you realize like that would be the most dreadful thing that would ever happen to you in your life, is to lose your child while you're in the presence of your child. That already to me is the most horrific thing that a mother could go through. So you see her going through the roller coasters of trying to deal with not blaming herself, but still blaming herself on the fact that she lost her son that day, not knowing where her son is, and just going through the roller coaster of emotions with her. And this book was so good. Again, one of these books where I think I only took 2 breaks from it. I literally finished it in a sitting or 2 because it was that gripping, it was that interesting, it was a page turner. Even if you're not a mom, read this book because this book was so good. And the reveal, the things that happen at the end, just the way that this book ended, it was perfect. It's the perfect ending. I was satisfied. I can't talk highly enough about this book. You guys should read it. I'm telling you, it's a really great psychological thriller. Then I read Summer Romance by Anna Monahan. This one I gave a 4.5, not necessarily a 5 because it didn't grip me as much as the last 2 books of hers did, but nonetheless, I had a great time. And this is basically a summer romance between a woman named Allie and a man named Ethan. So Allie in this book is going through a lot. She's a single mom. Her husband has just left them. Her mother has just passed away 2 years ago. So she's going through all the emotions that you could possibly go through when your life just crumbles in front of you. And so the book is following her and how she deals with that as far as being a single mother and dealing with all the emotions and all the responsibility that she has now on her back, given the fact that her husband has left. What better way to deal with those emotions than to fall in love and have a summer romance with a guy named Ethan who she happened to meet at a dog park because her dog peed on his leg. And that's pretty much all I'm gonna say. Again, Annabelle Monahan's books are always jam-packed with emotional roller coasters. They're not even rom-coms. They're romances that are flawed. They're characters that are flawed, going through things in their lives, trying to find a way to cope with certain things or move on from certain situations in their lives or learn to become who they used to be before everything else happened to them, and then finding love or having a friendship blossom and then it turns into a romance. And so her books are so meaningful to me because in every page she packs in their emotions and tears, more of like this realistic love that you see nowadays. Nothing perfect like a fairy tale, but more flawed but beautiful in its own way. And the way that she writes too is so captivating. You will be hooked. Pick up one of her books, any book. You will be hooked by the first page because of the way that she writes her books and her romances, her flawed characters. It's just perfection. 4.5. I had a great time. You guys should read her books because they're amazing. Then I read the second book in the Jack the Ripper series, and that is also included, I believe, in the readathon, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember, you guys, but I will link it down below. You guys can check that video out. Hunting Prince Dracula by Carrie Maniscalco. Maniscalco. I think that's how you say her name. 5 stars. This has the best Dracula creepy gothic-y atmosphere that you will find as far as a vampire book goes that I've read so far, and I had such a good time. And in this one we're following a different mystery. We're still following the same character, and I forget her name once again. I don't know. I forget her name, but we're following the same character, and this time it is in Romania, in this prestigious castle school type of thing where she goes to continue her studies. What happens in this creepy gothic-y castle school thing is that bodies are piling up. People are ending up dead, but in a very Dracula-esque way, meaning there's a stake in their heart, there's blood somewhere on them, as if they were being slain by a vampire hunter or a vampire killer. So it's very interesting, the concept. I don't want to say a lot, but it's very interesting the way that the author wrote this particular book because it gives you all the Dracula vibes and the creepy, scary vibes, and it makes you second guess yourself and really think like maybe there are vampires, maybe there is a Dracula out there killing people or drinking their blood, because the victims also have 2 like prick marks on their necks as if Dracula has drank their blood. So what I love about this author is that you might think that the book is going to steer you a certain way, but it actually does like a 360, flips you on your back. You had no idea you saw it coming. But again, all her books are very atmospheric. They're always very dark and gloomy. The vibes are always there when it comes to gothic mysteries, and also it's very gruesome and grotesque at times, can be gory depending on the storyline. 5 stars. I had such a great time. I'm gonna be so sad when I finish this series because I have enjoyed all her books so far. Then the next 3 books I read, they were all psychological thrillers. We all know I love me some psychological thrillers, and I read them all on my Kindle. Most of these books that I'm sharing with you guys are on Kindle Unlimited, but if you're like me and you like to purchase the paperback, I hear you, I understand you, and I'm not judging because I do the same thing. And these books, I have literally seen people rave and talk so highly of them. Sometimes when I'm reading such thick books that require a lot of my attention, whether it's fantasy or like a mystery, but you have to pay attention throughout the whole book, I like to do filler books. And those to me are thrillers or psychological thrillers, and I always have the best time because you will see that the next 3 books I've read back to back, they were all psychological thrillers. The next book I read, which was another 5 star, was Don't Let Her Stay by Nicola Sanders. So this one is also about a family. This story follows a married couple. They're happily married by the name of Joanne and Richard. They have a baby 18-month-old by the name of Evie. They're just living their best life in this really nice, quiet neighborhood with a great relationship and a great marriage, and they're just living their lives, okay? One day, Richard gets a call from his daughter Chloe, who happens to be 21 or 22, from a different marriage, who reaches out to Richard and says, "It's been too long, Dad. I'd like to get to know my baby sister, and I'd like to spend time with you and get to know my family better. It's been so many years since I've seen you." And of course, because he had a falling out with his daughter, he can't wait to have her in his home, embrace her with love, introduce her to his new wife and his new baby. However, as soon as she moves in, Joanne finds herself kind of stuck and torn between these emotions that she's having of, am I going crazy, or does Chloe not like me? Or am I going crazy, or does Chloe really hate me? You know, and it's so terrifying to go through this because she's kind of stuck in between. How am I going to tell my husband that my relationship with Chloe is not getting better, it's actually getting worse, and I fear for my life maybe? And how does my husband believe me? So the story unravels and things literally hit the fan once Chloe decides that she wants to stay permanently with her new parents. And the story goes from there, you guys. It's so good. Page turner, very interesting. It messes with your head psychologically, and that's what I love about these kind of thrillers, is that like at one point you question if the character is crazy or not, or you question the situations and you can't believe them, and then at the end when everything unravels, you didn't see it coming. So that's what I love about psychological thrillers. This was no different. This was so good. 5 stars. You guys should read it. This should be your next thriller that you read. You won't be disappointed. Then I read The Maid's Diary by Laura Than, another 5-star read, another psychological thriller, very highly talked about in the thriller community. This was so fun and so good. Again, another page turner. It took me a day or two to finish it, only because I had certain things to do and stop. If I had all the time in the world, I would have literally binged this book, no problem. So in this book, we're following Kit Darling, I believe her name is, and that is the maid. Yeah, Kit Darling. And she's a maid. She's been a maid for a few years. She's highly recommended. She has a good reputation with the service that she works for. The only problem is that not only does Kit clean the homes of very wealthy people, but she's also a very nosy maid. She is your typical super nosy, extremely nosy maid. So nosy that she has to actually see a therapist for this problem that she has. Because once she gets fixated on something that she wants to snoop around on, it doesn't stop and it only gets worse, potentially putting her life in danger. So one day, Kit happens to see something that she wasn't supposed to see. And then the story goes from there. You guys, this book, out of all these 3 books that I'm going to talk to you guys about, this is the first one you should read. This was so good, so twisty, so fun. Everything that you need in a psychological thriller is in this book. You will never see it coming. You will never guess the end. Don't even try. Just go in for the ride. Don't even read the back. Take my word for it. This was so fun. I highly recommend it. Then I read Never Lie by Frida McFadden. Now, I will be honest. I read The Housemaid. This is the second book of hers that I read. This so far, compared to The Housemaid, is my favorite, just because of the storyline and how creepy and atmospheric it is. This is the kind of book that you want to read in the fall. Okay, in the fall. In this book, we're following newlyweds Trisha and Ethan. They're happily married. They are on the hunt for the house of their dreams. They end up going to this remote house in the middle of nowhere, which is the house that they are intentionally gonna buy at some point, to meet with the real estate agent there. As soon as they get there, the real estate agent is not there. They just decide to roam the house and explore a little bit. Everything is great and dandy until a storm hits and they get kind of snowed into this house. The story really unravels once Trisha finds this hidden door that leads her to a series of recorded tapes by a psychiatrist or a therapist that used to live in that exact house that has disappeared for a few years now and has never been seen or found. This book is creepy just because of the setting of it, because they are stuck in this secluded, remote little cottage house in the middle of nowhere. There's a storm outside. They can't really go anywhere. There's no service, and they're stuck with the creepiness of what an older house gives you, meaning creaky floors, weird sounds that you wouldn't hear in a new modern home. Just the tapes themselves, the recordings of the tapes and the sessions that this psychiatrist had with her patients, you guys. The ending was probably one of the most surprising endings that I've ever read in a psychological thriller. Again, it was one of those that I was kind of punched in the face with the ending and the reveals of it, because I had no idea and I did not see it coming. This by far, so far, is my favorite Frida McFadden book, just because of everything that it is about. A married couple. We all know I love that. A secluded house, creepy house at that, in the middle of nowhere. There's a storm outside, there's creepy tapes, and it's just perfection for the fall. If you're gonna read any thrillers in the fall, this is the one that you should put on your list. Then I read Drackle by Dacre Stoker and J.D. Barker. This was so good. Another 5-star read. This is obviously a story about Dracula, and it is just fascinating and stunning to me. The writing, the vibes, the backdrop, the atmosphere, the way that the narrator narrates this, the accent in these books are as if you were thrown in. So this is set in the 1800s in Europe, and it's again gothic-y and very atmospheric, about Dracula and this little boy's encounter with Dracula himself. But the way that it's told, it's very slow burnish, not romantic, but very alluring and captivating in its own way. The author's writing in this book is what makes this book so phenomenal and fantastic to me. The way that it's written and how you can be terrified out of your mind just based on words on these pages is so impressive to me, which is why I gave it a 5. I don't really want to say much about it, just go into it blind. Just know that this is kind of a Dracula retelling in a sense, but it's way different than your original classic Dracula. This one, again, we're following a little boy who happens to be very sick until one day he's not, and things happen from there. We're also getting the point of view of Bram Stoker and his diary entries and how he is that little boy. We're going through different timelines and settings throughout his life, and he keeps these diary forms where he explains his experiences with the encounters that he has with Dracula and possibly vampires. It's creepy, it's gothic-y, it's got such spine-chilling vibes that only you can understand if you read between the lines and the words. It's beautifully written, it's almost poetic in a sense of like so beautiful that it creeps you out, but it's captivating in its own way, to where even though not a lot happens most of the time and you're following the life of Bram himself, you are still captivated and enthralled in the story because of the setting of the book and the way that the narrator narrates and the way that it's written. It's just so phenomenal to me. 5 stars. Don't read the back, just go into it blind. Have yourself a good time with the audiobook, because again, it's all about vibes, it's all about atmosphere, and it was so good. And actually, you guys, I think I read this book in the beginning of September, but I actually read it at the end of August, and I forgot to include it in the beginning. So just scratch that. I actually did read 13 books this month. I don't know, add 300 pages to my page count because I almost forgot that I read this book and I almost forgot to include it, but I'll talk about that book in the end. Let's talk about the next 2 books in this list. The next book I read was Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahoran. This is the first book in the Serpent and Dove trilogy, which I'm trying to read this trilogy before I get to the Scarlet Veil. We all know why I want to get to that book, and we all know how I'm going to get to that book. I need to read this trilogy first. So book 1 was very good. I gave this book a 5 star. It was such a good time. The banter in this book, the atmosphere again, it was just chef's kiss, okay? If you didn't know what this book is about, we are following Lou and Reed. And Lou happens to be a witch. Reed happens to be a huntsman, a man of the church, who in this world, in this setting, which I believe is French, because there's a lot of French language in here, which is so delectable to listen to. It's so beautiful. In this world, in this setting, witches are demons. They're evil. They have to be literally murdered. They have to be burned at the stake because we cannot allow this world to have witches in them. Lou is a witch and Reed is a witch hunter, a huntsman, a man of the church who is very religious in that sense. And it's their romance. Of course, it's their forbidden enemies to lovers, real enemies to lovers romance, because he's trying to kill her and she's trying to kill him, and they fall in love. Again, the banter in this, Lou's personality and how snippy and sassy she is and how she is very vulgar, and he, again, knowing that he is the man of the church, he doesn't really like vulgarness or bad words, and she's full of them. So it's so perfect. I had a great time reading this book. It's another one of those books that I would recommend in fall because it's got witches, it's got magic, it's got the backdrop of France in it in this day and age where witches were hunted for being witches. It's got evil witches, it's got good witches, it's got great banter, great enemies to lovers, great forbidden romance. This is a YA, and I don't agree with that because there was a steamy scene in there, and I think YAs do not have steam in them, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. This was considered a YA, but it wasn't to me because there's a steamy scene in there. It's also a slow burn, which we all love a slow burn because I don't like when it's insta-lovey. Only when I am in the mood to read an insta-love romance, that's when I like those vibes. But for the most part, I like it when the romance is slow burning, and it burns very slow, if that makes any sense. I like it when the characters despise each other, but there's little gestures and little things that they do that You can tell that they love each other, even though it's forbidden. Like that feeling, that angstiness, the tension that you get between two characters when it's a slow burn romance, it's the best thing ever. I'm still reading the series, I'm still continuing it, and yeah, I highly recommend it if you haven't already started it. You should listen to the audiobook of this as well because, again, it was so atmospheric and their French is so beautiful in this book. Their French is just gorgeous. Then I read Her Soul to Take by Harley LaRue, 5 stars. This is probably my favorite book of the whole entire stack in this month because it was so good, you guys. It was so good. And in this story, we're following Leon and Ray, and how can I put this? We're following Ray, who happens to be a college student who one day summons a demon, and the story goes from there. And this is a dark romance about a human college girl and a demon who she happens to summon, and it was so good. The demon in this book, Leon, made me obsessed with demons. That's all I'm gonna say. He is perfection in a freaking book, okay? He is everything. He makes me question my morals at times, but in the best way ever. Another book that's very atmospheric, very gloomy. They're in this small town. It's always raining and there's monsters lurking in the forest. The school is also described as very gothic-y, very Victorian style looking, old school type of thing. I just had such a great time. If you're going to read this book, please read it on audio because of the way that it is narrated, because of Leon's voice in this book. It's just so good, okay? I'm continuing the series. I'm excited for the other couples in this series, and I don't know why it took forever to read this book. I don't know why. I read this so fast. I was so enthralled and immersed in this world with these characters in this romance. There's also a plot. It's not just a steamy, dark romance. There's also a plot in this book, which makes it 10 times better because even though I do like my steamy scenes, I like it when my books have plot as well. I like it when my books have something to be solved or something that happens in the book where the characters have to do something, you know, and it's not just steam after steam. I liked it very much. Highly recommend it. It was a good time. You will not be disappointed, and you will have a fetish for demons after you read this. Just saying. And then the last book I read, which I thought I read in September, but I actually ended up reading it the last day of August, is Blood Orange by Karina Hall. Now this was an afterthought because I thought I wasn't going to get through this just because I wasn't in the mood for it. This book, I think I gave this a 5. Yeah, this book was a 5-star. This is a duet, so it's part of a series. It's a duet, and it's the Dracula duet, and it is just a Dracula retelling. And my God, is this book not only steamy because it's very steamy, but it's so romantic and sad and just so packed with so many emotions other than just the steamy scenes, you know? All I'm gonna say about this book is that, can Dracula please get a break? Like, this follows Dracula and his love story and his romance, and you see him go through so much just to get to the love of his life, and it's just so heartbreaking to watch, but yet so romantic and beautiful and just everything. Like, I had no idea that Dracula in a sense could be this beautiful, and it's not only because of the writing, it's because of the story itself, what the story of Dracula really is in this book anyways, which makes me excited to read the original Dracula by Bram Stoker because I know that's not going to be anything near this one. I know that one is probably going to show and describe Dracula in a more horrific, terrifying way, but this was done so well. It's so beautiful and so tragic that, gosh, like, just read it, okay? Read it. It's beautiful. It's romantic. It's emotional. It's tragic. You root for Dracula and his love interest, and you just go on this ride with him, and it's phenomenal. It really is. Okay, so there you have it. Those are all the books that I read for the month of August. Again, I read 13 books, not 12 books, which is a really good number for me. Not only that, I read a lot of great books this month and a lot of atmospheric books. You guys should actually put all these books in your fall TBR. And I know your fall TBR is probably just as big as mine. Trust me, none of these books will disappoint. They all kind of have the same themes, meaning atmosphere, gothic, terrifying at times, a small town feel, monsters, everything that you could ask for in a fall read is in these books. All of these books have some kind of fall theme to them, whether they're like based around the season itself and it happens during that time, or the backdrop and the atmosphere and the setting of the book is just that atmospheric. They're just perfect for the fall. So there you have it. That's it for today's video. If you haven't already, please don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, and I will catch you on my next one. Bye!